Hello, welcome to Record Sports Hotline Live. My name is Daniel Caw. I'm delighted to be joined tonight by Record Sports version of the Neville brothers, Keith Jackson. Keith, how's it going?
Aye, not bad. You all right?
I'm okay. Mick?
Good. You
I
sound
feel,
good.
I feel no, like Neville the dad. That's how I feel.
It's good to have you both on board, guys. This is one of my favourite lineups anyway. Don't want to make anyone jealous, but this is it.
You all right, Dan? You say there's something different tonight.
I knew he was. I'm on my phone because someone somehow has changed my settings on my laptop. I can't get the bloody camera to work. So needs must.
Wow.
Did you try to turn it off? Did you try to turn it off and on?
I didn't think of it.
That's usually the IT solution, isn't it?
Yep.
Listen, I made it. We're okay.
Good. I'm glad you're here, Dan.
Aye, me
Not
too.
the same without you.
Where should we start? I think the best place to start, guys.
Breaking
is
news.
Celtic at 5:45 tonight. They put out a statement. The story is on Record Sport Online just now. Mac, you can probably tell us more.
Oh, well, I just put my kettle on for my wee cup of tea before Hotline Live. Do you know what I mean? They stuck out a statement. I listened, we knew it was going to do it in the way. 5:40. Yeah, it's on the back of this fan summit last night. Obviously, the kind of anger and animosity in the stands have been growing in the summer, and it's got to a point. Obviously, the protests in recent weeks and the silent protest planned for last week, they were also called off after the club invited a few selected representatives from fan groups for a meeting at Parkhead. This kind of united kind of front they've got now, the Celtic fan collective. They've kind of a bunch of groups that got together to form the kind of People's Front of Judea, or what is it? So they basically invited them into the tent for tea and biscuits and a chat. By all accounts, it hasn't gone particularly well. The fan collective put out a statement this afternoon, basically saying that it's only kind of increased their kind of animosity towards the board and their demands for change, accusing that the board have been lacking humility, awareness, and accountability. So clearly, it hasn't gone particularly well. I think a lot of questions were raised, and I don't think the answers that were given were particularly welcomed or accepted. In terms
who did they meet with, Mick? It was Michael Nicholson.
Michael Nicholson and Chris Mackay. So chief executive Michael Nicholson and the finance officer Chris Mackay, who were there. I say the questions that were asked, I don't think the answers they're looking for about recruitment in the summer, the kind of model, the financial, the kind of transfer model in recent years, the kind of slowing down the process. I mean, that statement obviously that was released a few weeks ago now, the infamous kind of 9 o'clock, the wine o'clock statement on the Saturday night. But doing like a lead balloon, the blaming kind of like financial fair play and all this nonsense.
Yeah.
So that wasn't particularly addressed particularly well by all accounts. The kind of the story, the credible story about the kind of briefing behind Brendan Rodgers' back has been kind of swept under the carpet by all accounts. They were asked about that. It seems to be that they said that they had a board meeting and nobody admitted to doing it. So therefore that was it finished. It was then case closed. Let's all move on. Which seems kind of, I mean, an open and shut case by all accounts. That didn't seem to appease anyone. So yeah, I think it's been not particularly great. Celtic have since come out with their own statement. I think obviously there's a big gather bit of momentum online. The statement from the fans collective. Listen, the statement they put out actually reads more like a statement they should put out rather than what I'm talking about, the 9 o'clock statement. And there's a line in it that says, "We acknowledge that the club is not where we want it to be at the moment, that we have not achieved all our objectives in the summer transfer window and the Champions League, and that mistakes have been made from which we will learn." That would have been the line to use 3 weeks ago, to be honest with you. We recognise the concerns raised, share the frustrations of our supporters, and value the opportunity to hear from supporters last night. So they're kind of trying to put a spin on it, saying, okay, we take your points on board, but we made mistakes, we're not happy where we are, we're going to try and learn from it. Quite how that works after the event, I'm not entirely sure, because it sounds like the fans have not been sold on this message or even given it last night. So maybe the stable doors are getting bolted after the horses over the hills. So I can't see peace breaking out anytime soon.
Well, it's the flip of that, isn't it?
Well, this is the thing.
The fans have walked away from that. Celtic have taken what was already a really bad, toxic situation, and they've managed somehow to make it worse.
Yeah, listen, what the fans want.
I'll-
I want to get into this meeting. I don't know if it was achievable. They're wanting heads on plates. They're wanting Peter Lawwell to leave. They want Michael Nicholson out the door and
It
Chris
was never going to
McCarthy.
work.
So that's never going to happen. I mean, and you got to take a step back and say this is a club that's got a lot of money in the bank, had a lot of success in the pitch. I think the European thing is a big issue, which is, I think, they're right to be angry about the way they've performed in Europe over the years. But last year was half decent, so they can point to recency of a decent campaign, albeit this year was a
I
disaster.
think that just makes them worse, doesn't
Right.
it? Because the Celtic board didn't function properly during the transfer window, the squad went into the European qualifiers undercooked, nowhere near strong enough. They've lost out in the Champions League campaign, and they're now toiling in the Europa League.
Yeah.
So what was achieved last season, that merely makes it worse and increases the level of anger.
Exactly, and I don't think there was anything that could be said at this meeting last night that's going to repair that damage, because it's already done. I mean, and listen, Celtic are going to live with this damage until January, because it's perfectly clear that there's gaping holes in the squad, an imbalanced squad. So the sins of the summer are going to be paid for months to come. So, and every time there's a bad result, it's going to flare up again.
Mm-hmm.
This meeting hasn't helped appease the fans at all. I mean, I said that the statement today kind of should have been said last night, maybe. Doesn't sound as though that's been the case. It seems to be they're kind of sticking to their guns and defending their kind of their actions. I don't see where this goes, apart from animosity rolling on for months and months and months. The fans groups are now going away to think about what their next move is in terms of protests. I don't think we'll see silent protests. I don't think that one worked. The Hibs one last week was a bit of a kind of a damp squib, really. Albeit the planned one for the half hour against Braga was shelved. That might have been interesting. But I think that we're already seeing the damage done by the kind of recent windows and the kind of the inertia in terms of the transfer of the window. It's empty seats. You're looking at Celtic Park on Saturday against Motherwell. There's empty seats around the place. I mean, that's not something we're getting used to seeing in the last kind of 10 years at Celtic Park, 15 years. Against Braga last week, albeit it's an early kickoff, empty seats, up to maybe 10,000 empty seats. There's probably 5,000 never bothered to turn up against Motherwell on Saturday, maybe less, maybe slightly less, but either way, it wasn't a full house. So you're actually seeing every seat that's empty is a kind of protesting away. Do you know what I mean? That's a kind of a vote of no confidence, because the team isn't performing. The board's malfunctioned over the summer, and listen, you can go back to last summer and in January. It's happened over a period of windows now. So I think there is going to be very visible and very vocal protests, I think, coming up. And I think it's going to be even magnified, because I think there is going to be bumps in the road for Celtic, especially in Europe. I think this team doesn't look equipped for the Europa League, as Keith, you were saying. Mm-hmm. So every time that's going to happen, this is going to flare up. So this meeting there's nowhere near peace breaking out, that's for sure.
Well, mate, I said on the show last week, I think it was, in the newspaper business, there's an old kind of secret of the trade, which is never start a campaign that you're not sure that you're going to win. Right? Yeah. And I think this is one with this Celtic protest, that they were never going to get the success that they wanted. What they deemed success was the head of Peter Lawwell, the head of Michael Nicholson, and whoever else. That wasn't ever going to be achievable, especially at a time, and I'm afraid what Celtic have done here by saying that there's going to be no action about whoever it was that was briefing against Brendan Rodgers. So the manager, a guy that's won piled up silverware into the trophy room at Celtic Park, he's not got the power to fight the battle and win it, because he called for whoever that was to either resign or be escorted off the premises. If Brendan Rodgers, as the most, as one of the most successful Celtic managers of the modern era, if he doesn't have the authority to win that battle, the Celtic fans were never going to win it. But now they've locked themselves into having this fight. And where does it go from here? Because I think you're right. I think it's not going to be silent protests. So what goes on now? How does this affect Celtic's season? I just think it's a pretty horrible state of affairs.
It is. It's a real kind of mess, really. I mean, you also got Brendan Rodgers' his contract is running out, so his future is up in the air. And he, and very kind of shrewdly, he actually said if this club meets my ambition, then I want to stay. I mean, he actually said he doesn't want to leave. If the big if, which is a bit of a kind of cute way, because he knows that how do you quantify that ambition? Do you know what I mean? So a kind of cute way of handling it. But he's basically said, I'll stick around if the club's going to be forward thinking and looking to kind of ramp things up and have a right good go at Europe, then I'll stick around. But that's not been the case in the last wee while.
And the subtext to that is, Mick, if he decides, which is looking more and more likely he will, that this is his last season, then that's his parting shot going out the door. I would have stayed. They weren't ambitious enough. You've got people in charge of your club that have got no ambition.
That's the thing. He's now can go. I mean, the way he left the last time left a lot of people kind of angered and all that stuff. This time, if he goes, nobody's going to kind of blame him
for it. No.
And listen, what will happen is because he's toiling just now. I mean, he said at the weekend, asked him at the weekend if this is actually his toughest spell as manager, toughest challenge as manager. He said, yeah, because his team's squad's really imbalanced, and as I said, there are gaps in the squad. He's having to kind of mend and make do. So he's having to use all his managerial powers right now to keep the show on the road. But there's going to be every game. It's not going to be like last season, the first half of last season, the 3 and 4-0 swashbuckling games and scudding teams left, right, and centre and all that stuff. It's going to be more like the second half of last season, the attritional slog to get results, and they probably will get a lot of results because there is some good players in that squad still, and they have got I mean, you've seen it at the weekend against Motherwell. They really are determined to dig out results sometimes, so they will keep going and getting results, but it's not going to be an easy watch. So by the end of it, I mean, it's going to be a lot of kind of dissatisfied customers all over the place, really. Europe's going to be an ordeal. I'm convinced that the Europe League is going to become an ordeal. I mean, I'm looking at the likes of Roma and Feyenoord, Bologna. These are tough games. I mean, Midtjylland with a couple of good results as well. I mean, there's none of this looks particularly appetising at the moment for Celtic. I think this competition just looks like. I mean, I thought that the game against Braga last week was fairly woeful. I mean, apart from a 15-minute spell, I thought it was quite fairly kind of abject and a wee bit embarrassing for them, really, for a team that's got ambitions of competing in the Champions League. And this is what I can't understand. I mean, talk about this meeting on Monday. Surely the guys in the boardroom watched that last week against Braga and thought, my goodness, in January, February, we were going toe-to-toe with Bayern Munich in the Allianz, going within seconds of taking them to extra time, giving them a right good game in the knockout phase in the Champions League, to go into getting chased about the park by Braga.
That's right. They were played off their own pitch by Braga. That's right.
I mean, talk about an entire club going right off a cliff. I mean, the drop off from then till now has been unbelievable. So they must see that they've got a semi-fit striker up front as their only striker. They've got a guy who's a left winger playing the right wing who wanted to leave and is getting held under duress practically at the club, but still doing his best. They're bringing off 34-year-old guys off the bench and hoping they can change games. I mean, all this kind of stuff. You're thinking, surely they must. I didn't know. I mean, this statement tonight suggests they maybe do now know, but they must be watching that thinking, how did we go from that in February to this? And it's because the summer was a disaster, and this is why fans are angry, because they paid up their £800 a year for season tickets. They bought the European packages and all that stuff, and they expect more. And I don't think that's a listen. I think fans can be sometimes a wee bit over the top, and especially the social media age, you get whipped up into kind of echo chamber frenzies and all that stuff, and you think, take a back step and take a deep breath, look at the bigger picture. But I get the frustration because they are spending. And they're thinking, why? And this money in the bank, I don't say it's their money, but a lot of that comes from their back pockets. And they think, why is that money sitting in the bank and I'm watching this? So, I mean, I get the frustration. And I don't think the board quite understand the level of frustration. But I think they get the fact that the team's not very good right now. And they go, well, that's okay. That's a mistake. We should have done better. That's fair enough. But I don't realise the fact that Celtic fans are going, we be paying top dosh. See, up to £800 a season ticket these days, and I'm having to watch this when the money's sitting there, and they can't. And still, nobody's answering why that money's sitting there. So I get both. I get it, and I also get why the board might think, and especially rival fans must be watching this Celtic carry on, going, "What is going on?" I mean, they're like they've won everything for 15, 20 years. I mean, they've got plenty of money. I mean, what are they moaning about? But I can understand it. I can understand why they're kind of climbing the walls.
Well, we've seen what the reaction looks like, Mike, and it's not pretty.
No.
So if Hearts can continue their run under Derek McInnes, if they can even open up an even bigger lead at the top of this table, it's just going to go from bad to worse. It's going to get angrier.
So I'm saying that it's going to be. Listen, it's hard for any kind of fan campaigns to keep momentum going, because usually at Celtic, this is the thing. Traditionally, after a window shuts, fans will moan for a few weeks because they didn't get their top targets or whatever it is, and then the results will take over and it kind of dies a death.
Calms down. Yep.
Yeah, but this time I think there's going to be problems with results. I think the league's going to be a slog. I think it's going to be. I said to you before, I think it might be a kind of one of these 84, 85 point winning seasons rather than your 100 points that has been in some campaigns. So it'll be a bit of a slog. There'll be loads of draws, the odd defeat, and Europe's going to be an ordeal. So that's every time they do get 2 or 3 wins, there'll be a sore one, and fans will be raging again, because it's all going to come back to
what didn't happen in the summer.
Yeah, all roads lead to the summer, and it's not even the fact that it's not even Celtic spending money. I don't think Celtic fans wanting to spend 40, 50 million quid. That's not going to happen. I think they just want to spend what they've got and not spend it so late in the window. I mean, in fairness to Brendan Rodgers, every single window he's had as manager, he's come out in a net gain. He spent less than they brought in, and so they've constantly sold their best players from under them and not replaced them. You can't replace like for like with these kind of guys at 25 million. That's the way it goes. But they're not even now. They're at the point having even tried to replace these guys. They haven't got a replacement for Nicholas Kuhn. Still, there's no right winger at the club. I mean, James
Kyogo, Mick. Kyogo.
I know Kyogo. I know.
They sold Kyogo and never replaced them immediately in January. Then they go to sell Adam Ida and replace him with Iniacho, who hadn't played since March, who needs plenty of time. He still can't do 90 minutes. And I'm in October. And that's the only recognised striker on the book. Sorry, you can go see it.
And by the way,
or Yamada, but they're not the standard they're required.
Well, I was going to say, Mick, they're any actual injury away from an absolute catastrophe.
Well, that's the thing. They're a couple of hamstrings away from complete nightmare. I mean, that's the thing. It is
mismanagement. Whatever way you look at it, it is mismanagement, and the fans are quite right to be angry about it.
Listen, they have. I mean, you all say that the statement tonight said that they've made mistakes and they're going to have to learn from it. But we heard this before. This was last January. The same statement was put out. They've made mistakes. Need to learn from it. The season before in January, we made mistakes. Need to learn from it. I heard it before, so they need to learn. They need to. I mean, they've had some great success in the transfer markets. I mean, you've got to say Celtic have been
superb,
absolutely sensational at buying cheap, selling big. But in the last 3, 4, 5 windows, that's kind of run aground a wee bit. And you now look at the squad and you think, where's the next big asset they've got? And you're kind of starting to struggle a wee bit. I mean, I think the boy Tunecki looks a real prospect. Very early days for him. He's only a handful of games.
But he's young and ambitious, and he's right at the start of his Celtic journey, Mick, and he's wanting to make a name for himself and, and hit the ground running. For all the reason, all the motivation is there for him. You're looking at the other guys that are now depreciating assets in the squad. Maida, Hatate, these guys that have actually seen their cycle through, and they should be someplace else. And now you've got this. And I keep coming back to it, Mick, because we mentioned it going into the window. I thought it was going to be fascinating because we were talking about, is this a 2-tier sort of signing policy? The club does the club sort of long-term investment business, and Brendan Rodgers still gets a bit of sugar at the end and gets the sort of quality additions that he felt were required. There wasn't a 2-tier policy, to my astonishment, because even up until the last day, I still thought Brendan Rodgers would be able to flex a bit of muscle because of the money there, and they would get the quality that he was looking for. It hasn't happened. His squad is downgraded, and the fans are quite rightly furious about it.
I think that was the intention as well. I think Celtic were intending to spend money late in the window. I think they were. I mean, listen, people will look back at last summer and they say, well, Brendan Rodgers spent 27 million quid on Ida, Trusty, and Engels, wasted 26 million quid. That's the rhetoric, right? Brendan Rodgers didn't spend that money. Celtic spent that money.
Yeah, I know, but
Ida wasn't £9 million until Celtic paid £9 million.
But Mick, that's where the problem lies. I think there are people in the Celtic board. I think there are people in the Celtic board that look at that and think that's a clear deviation from the way the business model that the club has been using for years and years and years. Brendan, I think they blamed him for having too much influence, but for perhaps pushing the chief executive into going into deals that Celtic wouldn't normally go into, and include Kieran Tierney returns to the club, because that was roundabout, you know, I know it was 6 months later that the deal was sealed, but he came back in a bumper wage. And again, that would be that's in direct conflict with the way that Celtic like their business. So all these things went on, and then clearly in the summer, Celtic have said, no, we're not doing a repeat of that. We're going a different way. We're going back to something far more familiar and something that's been proved to, you know, get results time and time again in terms of buying low, selling high.
Yeah, but the hand was forced to spend that kind of money last year because they're running around with hair on fire in the last few days of the window. If you've got a proper signing strategy, you don't listen. Serious clubs aren't running about in the last week of the window buying players to make the numbers up in the squad, to fill a squad of key positions. And Celtic have been doing that. And that's just not the way to operate. I mean, you go and get your bits, like to say, you kind of the final kind of additions that will really kick on. But you don't go and have to get the key components in your squad that late in a window. And it happened the year before. They're running about their hair on fire, end up spending over the odds for these guys because of when it was. I mean, I'm not entirely sure where this myth came in that you get bargains late in the window. Maybe a loan deal late in the window, like Carter Vickers back in the day, or Jota back in the day. You don't buy players late in the window and get bargains. That's just not how it works. And it works both ways. Celtic one I watched, they sold Armida for what, £6.5 million. But they never had a replacement lined up. So listen, we can over that's all gown, right? But what I don't understand is, or I can't really predict, is where it goes. It just looks to me as going to bitterness and anger is going to continue until there is some sort of major change. But is that major change going to be in the boardroom? I can't see it anytime soon. I don't know. I just don't know. But so it's going to rumble on for most of the season, I think.
Well, look, guys, I've been putting comments up from everyone watching, and some brilliant comments already. If you want to have your say on Celtic and the statements, please do so. We will, of course, guys, be talking about Rangers and their search for a new manager as well. But before we go into that, let me read out a few of the comments that have come in. John says, Nicholson is a puppet. It's Lobel that's pulling the strings and needs forcing out. Your loyal Muppet says, Celtic's board is just gaslighting the protest. They don't care what supporters do as long as the money comes in. Rebel says, they could have said we will try to rectify it in January. At the very least, seems like they are not humble enough to say it face to face with the fans. Marzuno says, I can't see how big a meeting airing grievances was going to be helpful. We all been in these kind of meetings before. There would have to be a couple of fan representatives elected. And this one, at the end, I didn't really get this, so I'll give you a chance to reply, Mick. John Watt says, come on, Michael, you're as delusional as the board if you're making out the transfer window was anything but a disaster. You did say it was a disaster, didn't you?
I did say it was a disaster. I don't think I was trying to sugarcoat it.
John, maybe turn your drawing
I think what you would say is, well, Celtic needed a backup left back, a striker, a couple of wingers, and they got all of them, but just that they got them in too late. And forgot to get a right winger, and forgot to sell the one who wanted to go. So I don't think you can say anything other than a disaster, no.
And just finally, to round off the comments, Big Rab says, if anyone thinks for a second the Celtic board will open the chequebook in January, then you're nuts. The cash flow is down, so they will spend to get the fans back on side. So there you go. Pretty emotional responses from the Celtic fans, Keith.
And I think, you know, the Celtic board will be looking already at January, and they better get their ducks in a row. And, you know, they don't have the excuse of saying that they don't have cash. If they have to pay over the odds to do something in January, they're going to have to do that, as much as they'll grit their teeth at the very prospect of it. But yeah, I tell you what can't happen. What can't happen is another series of missed targets in January. So if Celtic are serious about this, they're going to have to get all these things lined up, done ahead of the window even opening, and ready to press the button. Because I strongly suspect that by that point, Brendan Rodgers is going to need a bit of help. I think the squad's going to needs to be properly balanced. But, you know, let's just imagine that Hearts stick with this. Let's just imagine that Hearts get into the January transfer window. Do you think Tony Bloom's going to be sitting in his hands? I guarantee you that ain't happening. He's going to throw the kitchen sink at it. So Celtic are going to have to get themselves ready for that January window. And they're probably going to have to hope that Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Marath, who are meeting in London and heading up the new hunt for a Rangers manager, they're going to have to hope that goes badly. Because if they choose wisely, Rangers aren't that far gone in this league campaign as to be dismissed at this point. And if Rangers get a proper manager selected and into the dugout ahead of the D United game after the international break, they've got plenty of time to find a way back in. So, yeah, I think the stakes are really, really high. And, you know, I have to say, I'm baffled that Celtic have allowed this to happen. Because they're usually a great deal smarter than that.
You mentioned Rangers there, Keith. Should we move on to the search for a new manager after Russell Martin's sacking? We've got a couple of comments on that already. The Sniper insists Gerrard will be the next manager. Trust me. There's already been rumours and stories going about today about
there's a lot of
Gerrard,
speculation
Derek
about Steven
McInnes.
Gerrard. Yeah, there's a lot of speculation about Steven Gerrard. Steven Gerrard has appeared this afternoon in a podcast with Rio Ferdinand. And I think, you know, I think people will probably hear what they wanted to hear or want to hear from that podcast. To me, he didn't sound like a man who is ready to jump back into the front line anytime soon. He said a couple of things about, you know, I've had offers, but I don't have my staff in place and I need my staff. Mm-hmm. So I would want to be in a position that if somebody comes to me and I've got these guys all ready to go, then good. That'll be the right time for me. But there was no suggestion that, in fact, it was the opposite of that. He said that the staff, he hasn't got his planning right for who he'd want to come in with him if and when he takes on a new challenge. That suggests to me, along with continually hearing this stuff, whether it's financial or family reasons, that they're simply not ready to up sticks from the Middle East. They're in Bahrain and probably stay there for a while longer. And yet there's this thing about, you know, this romantic idea about Steven Gerrard going back to Rangers, the guy that stopped Celtic winning 10 in a row. So you can see it all. You can totally understand why his name is getting, you know, widely mentioned for it. But I'm like Scott McDermott said the other night in the show, he'd been speaking to people close to Steven Gerrard, and like the same sort of conversation I'm having, I don't think that the situation has changed that much since the summer when Russell Martin was the last man standing in the process, and we wrote the story that Steven Gerrard wasn't in a place to be considered for the position because he had other stuff to deal with, other issues, other priorities, and that involved, you know, spending more time in the Middle East.
In the comments, plenty of comments coming in. If you want to get involved in the discussion, please do so. Rangers is okay says, Tony Bloom, better hope we don't fancy taking his manager off his hands, Keith. The denial from Hearts fans is hilarious. If McInnes is asked, he won't knock us back twice. Gerrard for me, though. Player ID says, the dream team of Gerrard and the brains behind it all, Mickey Beale back, is a must. Your loyal Muppet wants something a bit more ambitious, though. He says Benitez or hopefully McInnes as manager. I mean, McInnes is a name, Keith, that just isn't going away.
Yeah. And I can understand that too. Why wouldn't you? If look at where Rangers are in the league right now, look at the money they've spent in the summer, look at the results they've had, look at what Hearts are doing under Derek McInnes on a fraction of the expense. Of course, it makes perfect sense. Of course, it does. But what did I say in the show last night, Daniel? If a man like Derek McInnes, if Rangers were to go after him, then if he was invited into an interview, he would be interviewing Kevin Thelwell, not the other way around. He would need to be satisfied that he would be working with people who will help him achieve what he would want to achieve. Much like Brendan Rodgers said about the Celtics board, Derek McInnes would need to be convinced that the people that he would be working with would share his ambitions and his vision for how those ambitions might be achieved. And I'm not sure that Kevin Thelwell and Derek McInnes would make comfortable bedfellows, I'll be honest. Now, what I do find really interesting, Daniel, and this is, I think there might be a little shift in the background politics going on, but that will become clearer over the course of the next couple of days. When Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Marath first came in, they were behind the eight ball in terms of the whole takeover took about 2 months longer than I think they projected that it might. So they were late. They were late to the party when they finally get in, and I think they rushed things. I think they made some bad decisions in that period. I think appointing Kevin Thelwell would be one of the chief among them. But they also said to Kevin Thelwell and Greta Steinson, we're going to delegate. You guys are in charge. Go and find us a manager or a head coach. And I get the distinct impression that they are reverse ferreting on that position. I get the distinct impression, and they've said pretty much as this in their open letter to the supporters, that Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Marath are going to be really hands-on in terms of the appointment this time around. And that's the admission that they had really very little to do with the last one, and which they've then admitted as a mistake. Now, the reason that I'm talking about all this is, where does that leave Kevin Thelwell? If Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Marath have decided that they're going to take personal responsibility for making the next managerial appointment, it means that they no longer trust or have any faith in the judgment of the guy that's employed by them to make these decisions as a sporting director. So I wonder, Daniel, if what we're witnessing here and what might be, taking place in front of our very eyes is that Thelwell's getting totally sidelined, and that they have made their priority, obviously, to get a new manager in place for the Dundee United match, and then they'll go back and deal with other issues, residual issues. Kevin Thelwell might well be one of them. And a further intrigue to that is, where's Robbie Thelwell? Because a week ago, that looked like it was an appointment which had just about been done and dusted, just so much so that Russell Martin was even talking about it in press conferences. Robbie Thelwell is yet to arrive, as far as I can see. I don't see any confirmation of his appointment. So if you were sidelining Thelwell, if you think that there's been too many errors of judgment and that his position has become untenable, you don't press ahead with bringing in his boy as head of recruitment, do you? So, listen, I think that's interesting. That'll be a key indicator. If Robbie Thelwell does sign a contract and is welcomed into the fold, then you would take it from that his dad is in fairly safe ground. If, however, nothing continues to happen with Robbie Thelwell, that points the opposite direction. And the reason for all of that is, Daniel, that might make the whole process a little bit easier. If you are going after managers of a proper calibre, they don't need to sit and interview Thelwell and work out whether or not he's the sort of guy that they could be comfortable working under.
Plenty of comments coming on this. Sorry, go on, Mick. Go on.
I can't understand. Listen, this is not just unique for Rangers. Is why is the new manager not sitting tomorrow with a club tie on and get unveiled? This is not a situation that
came out the blue.
I mean, the writing has been on the wall for a month at least with Russell Martin. And by the way, a lot of clubs are guilty of this. Although I see Watford have flown in Javi Garcia. And the old guy's not been sacked yet, so they're getting the new guy in before they sack the guy that's in charge now. So they've actually got their ducks in a row. But what I don't understand, I mean, especially when it's going so badly, the groundwork should have been done 3-4 weeks ago. I mean, listen, it probably did, but it should be ready to hit the button pretty quickly on this. You know what I mean?
Well, Mick, here's my theory on that.
Approaching managers, I mean, I can never understand why. And listen, as I say, most clubs are guilty of this one. It's they're always hoping for a miracle that things turn around, but there has to be contingency plans in place.
Well, here's my theory on that one, Mick. What if the sporting director is telling the owners, no, you need to stick here. We don't need a plan B. This guy's going to come good, and is resisting at every turn any discussion about it's time to pull the trigger here and look at plan B.
Yeah.
Well, again, that would undermine his position.
Exactly.
And if it's led to Andrew Kavanagh having to get in his private jet and fly over to London, and Parag Marath having to go and meet him, and it's led to the two of these guys that are, businessmen with a lot going on, but they're going to have to deal with the minutiae of attracting them. They're paying this guy to be in charge of all this. And if they've found out, Mick, at the 11th hour, and I think that what happened after the Falkirk game, or whenever it was, Andrew Kavanagh effectively pulled rank and said, no, I'm sorry, this decision has to be made now. And then if you find out, there's no plan B, then Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Marath have to create and visualize for themselves what Plan B looks like. And if that's not been done by the guys that you're employing to do the job, what does that say about the job security of the guy that's failed you?
But how is Andrew Kavanagh and Parag McGrath going to be doing this? Because they'll admit themselves, they're not the guys.
Football guys.
I mean, exactly. I mean, Andrew Kavanagh. I mean, that's not a face, but I'm pretty sure he's not going to pick out who's managing the top side in Slovakia. Do you know what I mean? So these guys rely on their guys on the ground to steer and advise, and that's why they're paid big bucks to do that.
And that's why they approved the Russell Martin appointment.
Yeah, so if we're not relying on them, I don't know where they're going. They're going to put up an advert in a shop asking managers to apply. I mean, they have to use the guys on the ground who have the contacts and have the knowledge and nous to go and look at for the next manager. So it's and then listen, they've got a very tight deadline. By the start of next week, the guys got to be under the desk and taking their team because they can't let it rumble on. Well, the season is in the balance.
I think you're absolutely right, Mick. And I think another thing that points to that is the fact that the players were given this week off effectively. Just come back. I don't know if they're back in on Friday, whenever it is. I know the international guys won't be back in until a week on Wednesday. But what does it tell you? Ordinarily, if you were going into a process that you thought might be likely to last 3 or 4 weeks, you would need to have an interim coaching team in place for the players, even just to take training. Even just for the guys to go in and get a loosener or whatever, you need some sort of structure there that allows that to happen. But I think by saying to the players, stay away from the place for 3 or 4 days, it tells me that they think they're going to have their guy quickly, possibly before the end of this week, but ready to go, ready to be in Glasgow on the ground by the start of next week at the very latest. So I think I think this I'm sure the Americans want it to move very quickly. Now, I think whether or not it does, that remains to be seen.
I think they will. I think it's no coincidence that the international break happened. And it might have been the case. I know that the Falkirk game pushed things over the edge, but it might have been the case that was going to get decided anyway. I don't know. But you think you're right. I think there will be a new guy in the door for Monday morning at training. Whoever's still about after the international break. But yeah. They've got this opportunity now to go and do that, but it's about who's next, isn't it? It's a big decision.
No, that's and on that, from getting around about the thing, I'm not sure that anybody's actually, unless there's somebody that's left field and that nobody would really expect, and they're about to pull some rabbit out of the hat. I don't think there's been an official reach out yet from anyone at Rangers to any potential candidate. So that tells me that, that this meeting that they're going to have would clearly have to be deciding it's this guy and we move now, because there's been a lack of noise and a lack of activity, which suggests they've either got somebody that's lined up and ready to roll, or they're as near as damn it in terms of the decision making. Because nothing else. Because I don't think it would be acceptable or wise for them to get to the start of next week and then think, God, we better get some guys in here to fill a few positions in the dugout, just to take training for a few days. So it's really, really interesting, and I think a lot of the politics going on as well is really interesting. And when this whole thing is over, we'll find out where, when the dust settles, we'll find out where it leaves Kevin Thelwell, where it leaves Patrick Stewart. But right now, I'd rather suspect they're sitting in some naughty step, being told not to move until the Americans get back up the road with a new manager. And there was even a suggestion I saw somewhere else that Thelwell had made the move for Sean Dyche, and within about an hour of that, Sean Dyche was obviously briefing Sky Sports News that he wanted nothing to do with it. So that didn't work particularly well either. And actually, Rangers were tripping up over themselves, and Sean Dyche was tripping up over himself to get the message out first. We didn't want him anyway.
There's not fancy a relegation battle, no.
Oh, shots fired.
Listen,
that's an area of expertise.
Listen, Rangers fans will be breathing a sigh of relief that Sean Dyche doesn't want it. So I don't think that's. I don't think there's any tears over that one. Listen, Steven Gerrard looks a bit of a no-brainer. But it's more about what does he want to do. I mean, Steven Gerrard's probably on his last life as a manager, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's had a couple of failures back to back. You usually don't get a third one. So he's got to weigh it up. Does he think? I think looking at that squad and looking at the kind of the landscape at the moment, does he think he can go in and be a success? Because he's got to be. Because not only is it going to be, would it be a disaster for Rangers, it would nuke his managerial career. So I mean, that'd be him done. So he's got to weigh up that gamble. Will he get time? I think he would get more time than most. I think if he did go in there, he would get the rest of the season, as long as they can put up some kind of fight and finish second. But as we say, the Hearts are hanging about there. Celtic are no great shakes, but they're still got enough about them. So does he want to risk his reputation? And I'm not saying his last chance saloon, but he's not far off it. I mean, we've seen the names of the clubs that are popping up, and he's knocked them back so far. I mean, he's starting to get the kind of the championship offers coming in now, isn't he? He said, I think he said in this Rio Fair, I think he wants to be a club that's challenging to win things. Unfortunately, you don't get to decide that unless it's clubs decide who they appoint. You don't get to cherry pick. I want to go to that team because they're going to go try and win something. Rangers are a club, in theory, should be trying to win things, so it should fit him. But it's whether or not he thinks it's too big a gamble right now. I don't know. It is interesting. It looks a pretty easy one if he fancies coming back. You hear Gary McAllister and Jermaine Defoe seemingly put their hand up and saying, "I'm ready to go, boss."
That was interesting, wasn't it? The two of them spoke at an awards bash last night, and neither of them were pouring any sort of cold water on the idea that Steven Gerrard might be on his way.
Quite to the contrary, batting their eyelids, but by looks of things, more like rather than pouring cold water. So yeah, the come and get me plea almost. So it looks like it's all there for Rangers, and it just depends on what they can sell to Gerrard if he wants to buy into it and wants to stake his reputation on it. Because as I say, it's a big next choice for him is a big one. So I understand why he's taking his time over it.
The next one for him is either the springboard or the anchor, isn't it?
Well, exactly. His name opens doors in the past, but unfortunately, after 2 or 3 failed gigs, the calls stop coming in. That's just the nature of the business. So I think Rangers need a heavy hitter. They need somebody walking that dressing room, a bit of presence, a born winner, somebody who will demand change overnight. No projects, no processes, no philosophies, none of this nonsense, none of this jargon. They need somebody who's a proven manager who can come in with a bit of clout. I mean, the times aren't aligned, but something like a few months ago, I remember when Clement was up against the wall and there was talk about the guys like something like Davy Moyes, something like that, a heavy hitter that can come in and command the entire club and drag it up by its bootstraps. But these guys are not easy to get and persuade to take on jobs. So it's a difficult one for them. But Gerrard, I think, fits that bill, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think also the same rule applies. I've said previously about Derek McInnes looking at this season, putting a big red circle just round this particular season. He's ended up at the right place at the right time when Rangers have got themselves into an absolute crisis and things aren't particularly great at Celtic. This season, there is a window of opportunity for Hearts, for Derek McInnes, but also for whoever steps into this Rangers job right now. Because, they're not in a great shape, but they're not dead in the title race. Celtic don't have the problems to seek right now. It might be a great time to take this job. Certainly a couple of wins. You would be taking over a team that's in 8th position. You would imagine if he's a competent manager in any way, shape or form, he'll take them up right through the league in a very short space of time in terms of positionally. But then over the longer term of this campaign itself, there's an opportunity because this is as weak as Celtic have allowed themselves to become for a very long time. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of upside. I mean, for all the mistakes I've made with the Rangers owners since they come in, they've still got. I mean, I still think they've got good intentions and they've got financial clout. So it's a much more stable environment than even a year ago when Clement's getting his wage bill cut at the start of the season, having had a decent run at first and then having to slash his costs. So it's a different environment. So it's all upside, really. If any manager with a half decent boss with a bit of clout and a bit of nous, I think they can do a decent job there. There's no reason why you can't compete at least give it a go in the league and pick up a trophy or two. There's no reason why that someone can't come and do that. What the downside is that I think that there's again, but like Celtic to a great extent, there's gaps in that squad at Rangers and some deficiencies in that squad.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll need to work wonders in the short term. But if I give a guy a couple of windows and make a fist of it, they should have enough to get through a lot of Scottish football in terms of getting back up the league and competing at the top end. But there's plenty of upsides to the gig. Plenty of upsides.
I'm aware, guys, that our time is basically up, but we've had so many comments, Keith, that I thought I'd run through a couple more if that's okay with you. Another minute or two. A lot of them on Derek McInnes. It has to be said, the commenters aren't convinced that he'd leave Hearts to go to Rangers. Badger says McInnes is going nowhere. He has a shot at a title as a manager. Think he'll show the loyalty as Bloom has shown him. Look how they got Shankland to stay. Tom Gill points out if McInnes goes to Rangers and wins the league, who cares? If he stays at Hearts and wins the league, he'll be immortal. AGSC Tech says McInnes is mad. If he joins Rangers, it'll take 4 or 5 windows to fix them. And he doesn't have Tony Bloom's brainpower at Ibrox either. And just a couple on Thelwell and Stewart. Luke says he wouldn't trust him to run a bath. And and Rangers is he okay says if I was Patrick Stewart and Kevin Thelwell, I'd be updating my CV on Indeed right now.
Yeah. Well, look, I agree with a lot of these comments about Derek McInnes. I don't think it's just as much of a home run slam dunk that a lot of the Americans might expect it to be, because there would be a lot for him to consider. This is, as I keep coming back to this particular season, and the comments right there, you know, if you think that you can lead Hearts to a title, my God, what an achievement. I mean, what are you looking at there on the scale of, you know, incredible managerial achievements in the history of Scottish football? That would have to be right up there.
Aye,
so
right
that would have to be factored into anyone's decision. But I keep coming back to it.
Yeah, but there's 7 games into a season, and it's Rangers, and they could treble your salary. I mean,
I think Tony Bloom.
I mean, how much have over it? Do you mean?
I think Tony Bloom would be in a position to push out the door for him financially, Mick, if that was a factor. And of course, it's a factor. Everybody, you're professional for a reason. You're there to do a job and get rewarded for it financially. So yes, that is a factor. I totally agree, and it does look like a no-brainer. I'm just saying, I don't think Rangers should just necessarily assume that we'll just pick up the phone to Dale. He'll come.
No, they should certainly ask the question.
I think they should. 100% think they should, Mick. Yep. But I do remember how it went when Dave King managed to blow up the whole negotiation at the 11th hour when Derek McInnes was coming down from Aberdeen. He didn't like the look of him. He didn't like what he was being told. He spoke to Walter Smith for advice, and eventually, having sought the advice of Walter Smith, he walked away from the table. Now, if, for example, Derek McInnes was put into this process and felt similarly towards whoever it is, whether it's if, for example, I'm wrong and Kevin Thelwell comes through this and he's bomb-proof and he's still the guy that's going to be calling the shots in there, that's why I keep saying, I think if you're a credible manager, you're interviewing him, not the other way around. And I think that's another thing that would need to get factored into the conversation. If Kevin Thelwell remains, intact and in this position of authority, that's going to be a consideration for Derek McInnes or any other manager that's part of the process.
Well, whatever happens, guys, we'll have you covered here on Hotline Live for the latest updates on the Rangers managerial situation and everything else Scottish football based. But for tonight, I think that brings us to the end of our Tuesday night's Hotline Live. Mick, Keith, it's always a pleasure.
No worries.
And I should say thank you very much for all the comments tonight. They've been first class. There's been so many of them. Apologies that I couldn't get through them, but they've been brilliant. Hopefully you can join us for a show at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
Cheers.